Hey everyone, Happy New Year, and we want to say Happy New Year and welcome to the very first Radiotopia Presents of 2024. It's a series that we are truly excited about. It's called Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. Now, this is from documentarian Jess Shane, who put out an open call on Craigslist and then worked with 4 strangers to explore the standard rules that documentarians and journalists use to tell their subject stories. So the series gets into all sorts of questions about what happens when people's real lives are collected, edited, and consumed. The show pulls back the curtain on what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite nonfiction shows. And then it turns in on itself and some really interesting twists and turns along the way in the making of the show. I've gotten to know Jess a little bit over the making of this show. Every time I chat with her, there's a new wrinkle to this story. It is really incredible. So go check out the new Radiotopia Presents series, Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. It is out now on your favorite podcast platform. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, June 10th, 1845, the funeral of former President Andrew Jackson. And you know what? Sometimes I like to just outsource my intro to accounts of the time, so I will now read from the account of one person in attendance, the Reverend William Menifee Normand. So Reverend Normand writes, and I quote, "Before the sermon and while the crowd was gathering, a wicked parrot that was a household pet got excited and commenced swearing so loud and long as to disturb the people and had to be carried from the house. The presidential parrot was excited by the multitude and let loose perfect gusts of cuss words. People were horrified and awed at the bird's lack of reverence." End quote. Intro over. Let's talk about this. Here to discuss Andrew Jackson's cussing parrot are, as always, Nicole Hammer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
I did kind of want to just do a string of curses to say hello,
Right.
but
I have a list of curses.
I'm like a parrot.
Yes, unlike the parrot. I have a list of curses for later in the show. But I suppose we were talking before the taping here that this might be our first episode about Jackson and kind of not really about him, but let's do a little Jackson 101. Kellie, what do we need to know about him and I suppose his death and sort of painting the picture of this moment when, you know, a president dies, it's a big deal, but what are we looking at here?
Oh, so this is wild. So this is during the days of duels. Duels were kind of a big thing. And so Andrew Jackson challenges a duel to Charles Dickinson. Charles Dickinson sort of insulted his integrity, insulted his wife. And so they prepared a duel. And Jackson waits for Dickinson to sort of take the first shot. He shoots him and hits him in the chest, 1 inch away from his heart. And then Jackson returns fire and shoots Dickinson in his chest in a wound that, kills him. But it's interesting because the bullet that was lodged in Jackson's chest actually eventually winds up killing him as well. He dies of lead poisoning. And this death, of course, leads to the funeral, and the funeral leads to the parrot, and so forth and so on.
Yeah. But we have a double death in this duel here.
A double death.
And
Jackson dies, much later than Dickinson does,
right.
But it all started with the duel.
I feel like this is an important point, right? That duel happens in 1806. So in between Jackson getting shot and Jackson dying, he becomes president. He lives for 39 years. So the duel definitely killed him. It just took a really, really long time.
Yeah, eventually, it's not till many decades later, but people do realize it was the lead from the bullet that eventually causes his death. But yes, he dies in 1845. Sunday, June 10th is the funeral. 3,000 people attend. Anything else we need to know about this stately event, or should we just talk about this swearing parrot?
I like talking about the parrot.
Okay. So there's just so much to uncover here. This parrot's name is Poll, P-O-L-L. Is that named after the way in which you take political temperature of citizens, P-O-L-L, or is that short for Polly?
I just think for Andrew Jackson, it's short for Polly, right? Okay. He was an outsider, man of the people. He's not somebody who listens to polls. He's somebody who listens to his heart and his swearing parrot.
His slowly degrading heart.
I just keep thinking Polly want a cracker. Yeah. Like, that's all I keep hearing in my head.
Yeah, well, Polly wants a fucking cracker in this case. So we'll call her Paul, I guess. And we actually don't know for sure whether it's Paul or Paul, but we'll call her Paul. Paul is an African gray parrot. Jackson bought this parrot as a gift for his wife, and then his wife was kind of like, I think you should be the main keeper of this pet. This pet seemed to not actually be a very popular creature in the household from the beginning.
Yeah, African gray parrots are actually some of the most intelligent animals on the planet. They can learn up to 1,000 words of vocabulary. They can use words in context, which I think is also kind of savvy. And then, they have the mental and emotional capacity of a 5-year-old human child. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when you think about what this animal can do, it's quite remarkable.
So as the parent of human creatures who are in the 5-year-old range, Kellie, do you think that says more about the kids or the parent that they have equivalent emotional capacities?
That's a good question.
I mean, I feel like 5-year-olds have tons of emotions. And so you've got to think that the emotional life of this parrot has to be pretty intense.
So what happens at the funeral itself? I read the account from Reverend Normant, but Niki, what else is your sense of what's going on here with this parrot, this disruptive parrot?
Well, I mean, it would have been a pretty big deal for him. It's a packed house. I'm sure it was a rowdy event. Jackson was known for hosting particularly rowdy affairs. He famously, on Inauguration Day, opened up the White House to the masses, and all of the chaos that ensued thereafter. So the parrot was provoked, I want to say, and is not responsible for the words that flew out of his mouth, which he no doubt was taught by the very salty Andrew Jackson.
Yeah, I guess that's something that's worth talking about, layering in terms of context. I mean, Jackson, I think, is sort of thought of as a salty figure. The parrot clearly picked up this language over the years and was mimicking what he or she heard just around the household.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I don't know how you train parrots, to say particular words. I think that would be interesting. I don't know if it's just repetition or how it works. But the fact that this parrot sort of knew what it was doing is what, to me, is just, and it also is sort of like, I don't know, symbolic of 5-year-olds having like meltdowns or temper tantrums. Yeah. And that's kind of what happens in this funeral.
Well, and you can also imagine that people probably rewarded this parrot a lot during its life for saying swear words because it's funny. It's funny when a bird swears. And so it's surrounded by all of these people, in addition to just being sort of overwhelmed. It could have also been like, man, I'm going to get a lot of treats and just like let it fly.
Yeah. And this brings us to probably my favorite tidbit of this whole thing, which I read at the beginning, but I just want to highlight that the good Reverend Normand in his account points out that the parrot is swearing and needs to be taken out of the room for the proceedings to continue, and that people were horrified. But moreover, he says they were, quote, awed at the bird's lack of reverence, as if there was an expectation that the bird would understand the solemn affair and show reverence for the moment, which I guess now we know about the emotional maturity of a 5-year of a parrot. But I just love that he goes out of his way to not just say it was being disruptive, but it was just not showing the right amount of reverence for this moment.
But who says let's bring the parrot? Mm-hmm. Who's sort of like, it's got to pay its last respects. The parrot's got poles, got to be there. I can't think of too many funerals in which animals, particularly birds, are brought in. Yeah. Yeah. Dogs, maybe. Birds,
right.
Nah.
Okay, so we don't have to do much more on Paul. There's a couple other things I want to get to, but it is worth saying, after the funeral, it's a little hard. There's some internet threads about what happened to the parrot, but it looks likely that it went on to his son, if it wasn't just sort of let out into the wilds. Who knows? Maybe someone just grabbed the cage and let the sucker free. But it looks like it was kind of beloved in a sense, and so I think there's maybe that justifies Paul's appearance at the funeral. Now, I think we've exhausted every historical tidbit from this moment. Sadly, the one sort of thing that seems to be lost is the actual swearing that this parrot used, which is unfortunate. But we do have a larger sense of the kinds of swear words that the parrot might have used. So here are some examples. I'm going to swear. So if anyone listening has kids or parrots in the room, you can send them out. But, okay, some swear words from the 1840s that this parrot may have used. A flapdoodle is a sexually incompetent man. A gib face is an ugly person, especially one with a heavy lower jaw. Hornswoggler, I think that one's still floating around, a fraud or a cheat. Pigeon-livered, it means cowardly, which I think, any bird-based cussing would have been very appropriate in this case. And then, I think that a lot of the common swear words like fuck and shit and all that stuff were around at that time. The other thing I started thinking about trying to research this or thinking about this is, that show Deadwood, which I love, is set in the 1870s, a little later, but it's on the frontier. I think Jackson was a bit of a frontiersman, so maybe some of those swears, and Deadwood has some of the best swearing in the history of television, motherfucker and cocksucker in particular. Cocksucker is used 8 times in the first episode of Deadwood, and I think there's something like 56 swear words in the first episode of Deadwood. So that will paint a picture of what the parrot may have been saying. It's a little hard to know exactly.
What's your fave, Jody? Tell us your fave.
Hornswoggler's pretty good, but I like good old motherfucker. It's hard to beat that.
I personally think of the parrot as a kind of artist, so I think he would have done combinations, like pigeon-livered flapdoodle would have been the thing that got him booted from the service.
Oh yeah, flapdoodle. That's
then that's the real question. Was the parrot just letting out a spew of swear words, or was it doing crowd work, and was it looking at individuals and lodging some sort of specific complaints? Yeah, we will never know. Okay. As we wrap up, this episode's going to be short. As we wrap up, we did start to look at some other sort of notable pets for presidents. And so, Niki, I don't know if you want to go through some of these. I mean, we can just dispense largely with the cats and the dogs because a lot of presidents have those. Very boring. What else do we have, though?
I mean, we have some pretty good ones. I think the most famous non-cat and dog one are probably Benjamin Harrison's possums. Famous because he named them after the Republican Party platform. He called them reciprocity and protection, which, turning them into carriers of the banner for the Republican Party was a good trick. He wasn't the only one to have a possum. So Herbert Hoover had one as well. Teddy Roosevelt had a whole menagerie of animals, including a lion cub and a hyena. John Kennedy, weirdly enough, did as well. Mostly horses, which is very much part of his blue blood persona. But after 1960, it really chills out, and it's basically just cats and dogs. So our presidents have gotten kind of boring, to be honest.
That's unfortunate because I really love John Quincy Adams' alligator.
He had an alligator.
The alligator he keeps in his bathroom.
Very briefly.
Or Teddy Roosevelt's one-legged rooster. I don't know what the story on that is, but pretty interesting to say the least.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny to think about how a one-legged rooster gets around.
I know. Poor thing.
Look, if any bird had a reason to cuss, it's the one-legged rooster.
Right?
It's a tough beat. Okay. That brings us to the end of the episode. This was very fun. If anyone else knows anything about how to train parrots or untrain parrots from swearing, right? What would your advice have been to get this parrot to not swear during this funeral other than just sitting it down and explaining solemnity of the moment? Please let us know. Any parrot owners out there, get in touch. But Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
And as we wrap up, another reminder that we are in the middle of our fund drive and we are opening up our big list of ideas document, this master doc that we use to help select the stories that we use. If you want to get access to that and take a look at hundreds and hundreds of entries of weird things throughout American history, become a member of Radiotopia, then let us know that you've done that and we will share you into this Google Doc and we'll see how that goes. This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. You can get in touch with us with any questions or comments or ideas for the show. Email us thisdaypod@gmail.com, or you can find a form at thisdaypod.com. My name is Jody Avirgan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Radiotopia.